If one small act of kindness could detonate a chain reaction that spirals into something far bigger and more dangerous, would you still do it? In a dusty corner of a sleepy Californian town, something strange began unfolding at a humble car shop. And it all started with a broken-down Chevy, a faded military ID, and a mechanic with a secret of his own. Jared Red McAllister wiped his hands on an oil-streaked rag as he glanced across the cracked pavement outside his garage. At 46, the creases on his face had deepened not from age, but from years squinting at rusted engines under the blistering sun of inland California. His shop, Redline Repair, sat on a tired strip in Modesto. It wasn't flashy 3 service bays, some no-frills gear, and a waiting area with a coffee pot that brewed something closer to rocket fuel than coffee, but it was his. After 13 years turning wrenches aboard Navy destroyers, this garage was the civilian dream he'd earned with sweat and stubbornness. Framed in a dusty corner behind the front desk was a sepia photo of his father, Lieutenant Conrad McAllister, stiff in uniform, staring out like a man ready for battle. He died on a covert mission in 1980, when Jared was just a toddler. Jared had chased his ghost into the military right out of high school, serving with precision until a brutal ACL tear ended his active duty. Now Redline was his warship. He ran it like a command post, quiet, clean, clockwork. He didn't talk much about his service, but veterans could spot the signs the way his tools were arranged in sniper-like rows, or how he straightened slightly every time the anthem buzzed from the radio on the shelf. One sluggish Tuesday, a battered Impala coughed its way into the lot. Jared eyed the plate's Vietnam vet, Marine Corps. The driver was a wiry man, with a tremor in his hands and a softness in his voice. "Name's Tom Berenger," he said, stepping out slowly. "Think the transmission's giving up on me." Tom's eyes dropped as he muttered, "Ain't got much in the bank this month. Social check barely covers rent. Maybe you could just tell me what's wrong. I'll come back when I can scrape together enough." Jared nodded and popped the hood. What he found was a transmission begging for retirement $1,400 in parts and labor minimum. Tom clearly couldn't pay that. Without a word, Jared got to work. 6 hours later, the Impala purred like it hadn't in years. When Tom came back, Jared handed him the keys. "She's ready." "What's the damage?" Tom asked, already digging for his wallet with hands that had clearly seen combat. "No charge," Jared said, arms folded. "Veterans ride free. You paid me long ago." Tom's eyes misted. "Son, that ain't right. That's hours of work." Jared just nodded once. "And you already earned it?" That evening, Jared scribbled something on a piece of cardboard and taped it beside the cash register. "Veterans, no charge. Thank you for your service." Word spread like spilled oil through the veteran community in Modesto. The next day, a Gulf War vet came in with a faulty radiator. A week later, a Navy corpsman limped in needing brake repairs. Some jobs were minor, others took days, but Jared didn't blink. He stayed late. He worked Sundays. He paid for parts out of pocket. Not everyone cheered. Down the block, Curtis Danner, who ran Danner's Auto, started flapping his gums. "McAllister's doing it for clout," he told anyone who'd listen. "Ain't nobody fixing cars for free unless they're getting something out of it." Jared's neighbor, Neil Foster, snorted over the fence one morning. "You're letting those old guys con you, Red. They get benefits already. You're a sucker." Even Jared's brother-in-law, over meatloaf at a Sunday dinner, weighed in. "You got Emily and the twins to think about. This charity streak's gonna bleed you dry, man." Jared just passed the peas and smiled. "Those folks gave more than they ever got back. Least I can do is tighten a few bolts." Weeks passed. His accountant finally cleared his throat. "You're losing revenue. Some months you're barely breaking even. Maybe limit free repairs to 1 vet a week?" Jared didn't even pretend to consider it. "Some debts," he said, "don't fit on a spreadsheet." And then came the Thursday. Rain slammed the pavement as a vintage Ford F-150 rolled into the lot, rust clinging to its frame like bad memories. The driver stepped out slowly, late 60s, silver hair, posture like a parade ground statue. "Ernest Delgado," he said, offering a firm handshake. "Got a noise in the transmission. Thought maybe you could help." As Ernest filled out the paperwork, Jared caught a glimpse of his ID peeking from a cracked leather wallet scuffed and worn, but preserved in a clear plastic sleeve. One insignia stood out: dual tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. For someone his age, that was rare. That was rare. "I need it by Monday," Ernest said. "Still work graveyard security. It's how I stay off the couch." Jared nodded. "We'll get her running." After Ernest left, Jared dug in. The damage was but a full rebuild. The parts weren't cheap, didn't matter. He ordered them overnight and pulled a double shift to finish it. When Ernest returned, Jared tossed him the keys. "She's solid now. What do I owe you?" "Nothing. Your money's no good here." Ernest stared at him. "You Navy?" 13 years, destroyer mechanic." Ernest gave a quiet nod and pulled something from his Pocetta smooth gleaming challenge coin. "Special Operations Unit. Rare. Serious." He set it on Jared's desk and said softly, "You've stepped into something, son, and you don't even know it yet." Then he got in the truck and drove off into the rain. That same week, murmurs started bubbling up around town. Curtis Danner ramped up the trash talk. He's using vets to play the hero. Then, he jacks up prices for everyone else. It wasn't true. Jared's rates hadn't changed a cent. Still, the whispers had started, and they were only going to get louder. Is McAllister a silent patriot, or a clever manipulator using loyalty as a marketing gimmick? Rumors spread fast in small towns, especially the ugly ones. Whispers claimed Jared's generous repairs were nothing but smoke and mirrors, a front for tax breaks, a scheme to turn goodwill into green. Jared didn't dignify the gossip with a response, but the backlash rippled. Loyal customers vanished without a word. At the lumber store, conversations dipped the moment he stepped inside. At his son Mason's baseball game, a couple of dads slid down the bleachers when Jared sat beside them. "Modern-day messiah," one muttered, not bothering to lower his voice. His wife, Emily Sharp, strong, and his partner of 16 years quietly began grabbing the mail before Jared got home. Some envelopes contained nothing but venom. Anonymous letters calling him a poser, accusing him of inflating his service record. "Maybe we pull down the sign," Emily said one evening as they sat at the kitchen table, drowning in bills and quiet. "Just for now. Let the storm pass." Jared shook his head slowly. "If I take it down, that means they win. That means they were right." The strain crept in like rust. Jared had to lay off Travis, his part-time apprentice. Then came the painful part selling some of his custom tools, the ones he swore he'd never part with. He even refinanced their modest ranch home, telling Emily it was to secure a better rate, even though it was just a desperate lifeline. One night, Jared's phone buzzed. A message from Ernest Delgado. "You've stirred hearts you don't even know exist. Don't stop now." It was cryptic, haunting, and oddly comforting. A week later, a call came through block number, Washington, D.C. area code. Jared hesitated before answering. A pause, then a voice. "Keep doing what you're doing. We're watching." The line went dead. No explanation, no ID, just eerie, deliberate silence. While these strange messages offered a flicker of hope, they were no match for the hostility rising like floodwaters. One gray morning, Jared arrived at the garage to find the front window smashed in. Spray painted in red across the cracked glass. "Fake hero." Emily pleaded, "Jared, call the cops." But he just swept the shards into a pan. "They've already made up their minds. A police report won't change a thing." He paused at the back of the garage where Ernest's truck had sat for 2 weeks. Fuel pump busted. He hadn't had time or courage to fix it yet. He ran his hand across the old truck's rust-flecked hood. "Maybe I am a fool," he murmured to the silence. If you still believe that quiet courage matters, that small acts ripple far and wide, type HOPE in the comments. The next Tuesday, Jared came in earlier than usual. The night before, the bank had officially declined his loan extension. He needed to start drafting goodbye letters to suppliers. He needed to tell his 2 full-timers, Mark and Denise, that they'd soon be out of jobs. Most of all, he needed to tell Emily that the future they'd planned was gone. He opened the shop the next morning like nothing had happened. Oddly, that act the quiet defiant sesh did something. Customers who'd stopped coming trickled back in. A few offered sheepish apologies. One Vietnam vet brought coffee and fresh donuts. A handful volunteered to help install the new window. Small gestures, but Jared accepted them with quiet grace. Still, goodwill didn't cover payroll. Late one night, Jared sat hunched over his laptop, blinking at numbers that refused to cooperate. At this rate, Redline Repair had maybe 2 months left before the final wrench got hung up. He hadn't told Emily yet. He couldn't bring himself to admit that everything they'd saved was now circling the drain because of him. He paused at the back of the garage where Ernest's truck had sat for 2 weeks. Fuel pump busted. He hadn't had team or courage to fix it yet. He ran his hand across the old truck's rust-flecked hood. "Maybe I am a fool," he murmured to the silence. If you still believe that quiet courage matters, that small acts ripple far and wide, type HOPE in the comments. The next Tuesday, Jared came in earlier than usual. The night before, the bank had officially declined his loan extension. He needed to start drafting goodbye letters to suppliers. He needed to tell his two full-timers, Mark and Denise, that they'd soon be out of jobs. Most of all, he needed to tell Emily that the future they'd planned was gone. The coffee machine chugged and hissed in the background, while Jared stared at the financial ledger on the counter, hoping for a miracle that wouldn't come. Outside, the town stirred to life. Across the street, the donut shop was raising its metal gate. The light changed, traffic trickled in. Jared had just closed the accounting book when he spotted the first black SUV. It rolled in slow, tinted windows, unmarked plates. Then came another, then a third. Within minutes, 6 sleek black SUVs had encircled Redline Repair like a protective wall. Men in crisp suits stepped out, murmuring into earpieces. One approached the front door and knocked, despite the glowing open sign. "Jared McAllister?" the man asked as Jared opened the door, a cold knot forming in his gut. "Yeah, that's me," he said, unsure whether to run or salute. Was this about taxes? Had someone filed a complaint? "Please step outside, sir. There's someone who would like a word." Heart thudding, Jared stepped into the morning light. A crowd had already formed on the sidewalk, shoppers, coffee drinkers, dog walkers, and curious onlookers frozen in place. Even the McDonald's drive-thru across the street stalled, as employees leaned out windows to gawk. Camera crews began setting up. A woman with a press badge barked orders at lighting techs. Then came the roar of military-grade engines. A line of Humvees pulled in behind the SUVs. Something big was happening. "What the hell is going on?" Jared muttered, but his voice vanished as the crowd parted. Out stepped a silver-haired man in a flawless navy suit, flanked by uniformed officers whose ribbons shimmered in the sun. Jared recognized the man instantly from press briefings, war zone visits, and televised addresses. The Secretary of Defense. He walked up to Jared, extended a hand. "Mr. McAllister, it's an honor." Jared shook the hand, dazed. "Sir, too don't understand. America needs more citizens like you," the secretary said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Men who act without applause, who give without being asked." He turned slightly. An aide stepped forward, carrying a polished wooden box. "On behalf of the Department of Defense and a grateful nation, I'm here to present you with the Distinguished Civilian Valor Award, the highest honor we can give to a civilian." Jared looked down at the medal inside the box. He blinked once, then twice. Was he still dreaming at his desk? "Sir, I don't understand," he whispered. "He earned it," the secretary said with a measured smile. 3 months ago, you worked on a truck belonging to a man named Ernest Delgado. What you couldn't have known then is who he really was." Jared blinked. "Ernest served in special operations for more than 3 decades, the secretary continued. "Most of his missions are so deeply classified, they won't see daylight for another 50 years. From behind the line of suits and medals, Ernest Delgado himself stepped forward, standing taller and more commanding than Jared had ever seen. He wore a sharp, dark suit, with military decorations gleaming on his lapel like badges from another world. The coin I gave you, Ernest said, voice steady, isn't just a trinket. It's only handed out to those who've earned the highest level of respect from the special ops community, people who show uncommon valor and heart. I gave it to you, he continued, because what you did, it mattered more than you'll ever know. The secretary nodded solemnly. There's more. Ernest's brother, Major Julio Delgado, served with your father aboard the USS Lexington in 1980. They were on the same mission when your father was lost. Jared felt his breath catch. You knew my dad? Ernest's eyes softened. Your father saved my brother's life that night. Pulled him from a flooding compartment seconds before it blew. When I saw his picture in your office, I knew who you were. And I knew why you do what you do. You're finishing what he started. The secretary turned back to the crowd. And that mission, Jared's mission, has had a profound effect. His repair work for veterans has enabled hundreds to reach medical appointments, job interviews, even say final goodbyes to family members. From the crowd, a grizzled man stepped forward. My granddaughter's graduation, he said. Car broke down. Jared got it running. I wouldn't have made it without him. A woman raised her hand. My husband's cancer treatment, 3 years in remission now. Your repairs got us to every single VA appointment. More voices followed. Veterans, spouses, children, each one a thread Jared had quietly stitched back into place. The secretary lifted his hand to calm the emotional swell. When Ernest told us what Jared was doing, we investigated. We found over 200 veterans whose lives were directly impacted. The coin Ernest passed along, it made its way to my desk with a formal recommendation. Jared scanned the crowd-familiar faces, distant neighbors, people who once turned away now gazing back with something close to awe. I just fix cars, he said almost to himself. You did more than that, the secretary replied. You proved the covenant between this country and those who defend it isn't just a government responsibility, it's a shared honor. The ceremony continued official statements, photographers snapping every second, and then the big reveal. The Department of Defense announced a nationwide initiative inspired by Jared's example, an auto repair assistance program for veterans. One of the country's largest parts suppliers pledged to cover the cost of Jared's veteran repairs for the next 5 years. Curtis Danner, the rival mechanic, who'd accused Jared of being a fraud, lingered at the edge of the crowd. As people started to leave, he shuffled forward, looking like a man who'd swallowed nails. McAllister, he paused, throat tight. I was wrong. He didn't meet Jared's eyes. Other neighbors followed, eager to shake hands, claim kinship, or mutter their own sheepish apologies. Someone had duct-taped a sign onto Jared's fence, Home of the Brave. Reporters surrounded him, voices tumbling over each other. How does it feel, one asked, to be recognized like this? Jared took a breath, searching for something that wouldn't sound rehearsed. I'm just a mechanic. I tighten bolts. The real honor belongs to the ones who wore the uniform. They're the reason I do any of this. As the crowd dispersed and the secretary prepared to leave, Ernest caught Jared's arm. Your father would be proud, he said. Of the medal? Jared asked quietly. No, Ernest replied, because you understood the most important lesson he lived by. Jared tilted his head. And what's that? That true service doesn't stop when you hang up the uniform, Ernest said. It's a lifetime commitment. If you believe real service never ends, and genuine kindness always finds its way back, type justice in the comments. The weeks that followed changed Jared McAllister's life, but also revealed what couldn't be changed. He was offered partnerships with national manufacturers, dealership franchises. Television producers pitched a docu-series called Wrenches and Warriors. Venture capitalists offered to scale McAllister Veteran Auto across all 50 states. Jared turned them all down with the same soft smile. I'm not trying to be a celebrity, he told Emily one night as they sat on the porch swing. I just want to fix cars and keep a promise. The promise didn't need to be spoken. Emily knew. A promise to honor his father's memory not with speeches or plaques, but through quiet, tireless service. Some things, though, did change. A nonprofit was created to support his mission. Donations began to flow in, covering parts and resources for veterans' vehicles. Jared hired 2 more mechanics, both former soldiers, both once unemployed and nearly homeless. He started a training program, giving young veterans a chance to learn the trade that had saved him. To be able to fix something, he told his first class of 5 nervous recruits, to put your hands on a mess and make it right that grounds you, especially when everything else feels like it's falling apart. And yet, the shop remained largely the same. Same 3 bays, same crooked radio antenna, buzzing the national anthem at noon. Same coffee is still too strong, still free. The hand-lettered Veterans Ride Free sign Jared had scribbled months ago, a scrap of cardboard with smudged ink, was now professionally framed. It hung exactly where it always had, beside the reception desk, untouched and unembellished. Jared refused to upgrade it to anything glossier. The truth doesn't need polish, he said. It just needs to be seen. Ernest Delgado's old Ford, the faded blue pickup that once limped into redline repair, now sat proudly in the corner of the garage, fully restored. Its paint shone like a polished metal, a crisp American flag permanently mounted on the hood. The truck had become part shrine, part classroom. Each new veteran trainee, fresh out of uniform, uncertain and searching, was introduced to basic auto repair by working on the vehicle that started it all. This truck connects generations, Jared would explain. It reminds us that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. In Modesto, the shift was visible. The same locals who once whispered behind Jared's back now pointed out his shop to visitors with pride. One day, an unmarked envelope arrived inside, an anonymous apology letter from the vandals who had shattered his window months earlier, along with a donation to his veteran foundation. One humid Wednesday, a young Marine, barely 20, eyes heavy with things he wouldn't, says that silently in the waiting room during an oil change. He didn't speak until Jared returned with the keys. The day I stopped believing in anything, he said, was the day my truck gave out. I couldn't make my therapy appointments, couldn't get to my kids' school. I was done. He looked up at Jared, voice trembling. Then someone told me about this place. You didn't just fix my truck, sir. You fixed something in me. You reminded me that decent people still exist. Jared gave a slow nod, understanding the weight of the words more than the young man could know. As word of the shop's mission continued to spread, reporters would occasionally ask Jared about his philosophy. Why hadn't he expanded? Why hadn't he stepped back and let others do the work? Kindness doesn't need cameras, Jared would say. It just needs someone to show up with their hands ready. On the anniversary of the Secretary of Defense's visit, the Modesto Gazette published a front-page feature on redline repair. The final paragraph quoted a local veteran whose car Jared had fixed long before the media attention. Sometimes, the acts that no one sees are the ones that save an entire generation's faith. Jared didn't fix my car for the cameras. He did it because that's who he is. The kind of American who reminds us who we're supposed to be. Writing Jared's story, I've asked myself, what if he hadn't done it? What if he had stayed quiet? What if he had turned that first veteran away, just run his business like everyone else? We would have missed a story the world needs to hear. In a time when division rules the headlines, Jared McAllister showed us something timeless. That real bonds between civilian and soldier, neighbor and stranger, transcend politics. They transcend belief systems. They exist in quiet deeds, not loud opinions. Jared never saw combat, never fired a weapon in service of his country, but he understood the soul of service better than most who have, that it can take many forms, that anyone anywhere can answer the call in their own way. What moves me most about Jared's story isn't the medal, or the media, or the high-level visits. It's the years before anyone noticed. The lonely Tuesday nights spent under a car, repairing a transmission for a man who couldn't pay. The Saturdays he skipped his son's baseball game so a widow could get to her VA appointment. The nights he sat at his kitchen table, bills in one hand, calculator in the other, wondering if he could make payroll. How many Jared McAllisters live among us right now? The retired teacher tutoring kids for free. The nurse who stays beside the dying when families can't. The farmer who leaves baskets of food at the shelter without a name. All those hands reaching out when no one's watching. Has someone ever helped you when you didn't expect it? Someone who showed up at the exact right moment, not for praise, but because it was the right thing to do? Think about them. Remember their voice, their kindness, their timing, their presence. Our headlines may be filled with anger, but the true story of humanity is being written quietly every day by those who help without applause. There are no history books for people like Jared. Their stories won't trend. They don't make noise. But without them, the world would be a colder place. So the next time you see someone struggling, don't hesitate. Channel Jared. Channel the quiet mechanic who picked up a wrench and chose kindness over cynicism. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can say is, "You're not alone." Subscribe to QH Incredible Stories, where everyday heroes are never forgotten. Type "remember" if you've ever known someone like Jared. Or if you've ever been that person. Only a fool fixes cars for free for those old soldiers. A neighbor once scoffed. Jared McAllister didn't respond. He just tightened the last bolt. 6 weeks later, the Secretary of Defense arrived with a film crew. What kind of miracle can quiet kindness really create? You just watched it.